All right, what's going on, everybody? This is your professor, Dr. Jace K. Austin, and welcome to week number 3. That is right, week number 3 of your 9449 class, which is your business reference course, basically, for CISL. As always, I am Professor Dr. Jace K. Austin, and I am being a little quiet today, so turn up your volume. My baby girl has been asleep, and she's been sick, and now she's asleep, and I am trying my best not to awaken her. So I'm not going to be my same loud self. I'm just going to try to keep it as an inside voice for a change, just so that hopefully she will not awaken. And if she does awaken, of course, I will be pausing the video and tending to her. But you all probably pretty much already knew that. So today we are just going to do a few course updates, and then we are going to get into, I'm just going to say a few things about industry research. So first of all, as far as course updates are concerned, or the state of the course, I should say, I don't know that these are updates. Your prompt for your final is almost finished. I'll have that up this week. Also, so far, for the most part, discussions are going very, very well. I'm very pleased with what you all are contributing to discussions. Don't get lazy, but so far, definitely so good, and please keep up that good work. For the most part, the worksheets are going well as well. However, and I had an announcement about this yesterday. Monday. So with the worksheets, even when you have them open, you are allowed to try to Google around and find answers, because really you are going to be doing that when you are in professional practice. That's something that seems to get lost on people at times, is that you're going to at times just open a database, and on the fly you're going to have to try to figure out what's in there. So you might be Googling around in order to find procedures, or you might be going to the help option in the database, or whatever the case may be, and that is perfectly fine. And you can also ask a librarian how to find a specific piece of information in the database. However, you cannot ask the librarian exactly, you can't just copy and paste the question, for instance, in the chat and just have the librarian give you the answer. That defeats the purpose. But what you can do is, like for instance with Emergent as an example, you couldn't ask what Revlon's ROA, return on assets, was to a librarian, but you could have said, how do you find return on assets, to a librarian in chat, and then if they told you how to do that, you could proceed to find that information for Revlon specifically. So keep that in mind as you are going through the rest of the worksheets. It is okay to Google and find, or to use the help option and find out exactly how to find the information that is being requested of you, and you are going to end up doing that in professional practice, I promise you. Okay, so with the remaining time, I am going to try to keep this under 30 minutes. We'll see if I can do that. But with the remaining time, what I want to do is just talk about, industry research a little bit, just give you some of my thoughts. First of all, why even do it? Like, what would be the reason for doing industry research? So I would say that there are definitely specific people or specific types of people who may come in looking for industry research. And so these are the people that you would be, I guess, catering to, and the people that you would be serving if you learn the skill set. So, for instance, industry information has many uses, and the people who are most likely to come in for industry information, at least in the public library, in the academic library, your students may just come in for assignments, which would be typical. That, of course, shouldn't surprise anyone. But as far as industry research and who would use it in the public library or who would use it outside of assignments in the academic library, usually anyone who is trying to start a business will want some industry research for excuse me, for their plan, for their business plan. And so they want to get a good idea of what's going on in the industry, trends in the industry. They'll probably want SWOT analyses for the major players in the industry, because those SWOT analyses would cue them in on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that their business would face as well. Those who are attempting to do marketing and trying to reach out and trying to advertise, they may also want industry research, because they may want to know what other entities in the industry are doing, and then they want to set themselves apart. In order to be successful on the market front, what they might want to do is know what the competitors within the industry are doing, and then try to separate themselves out some way, somehow. And part of that is knowing your market. Competitive intelligence is something that also comes up when you talk about people who may want industry research. Those who are, and this kind of goes hand in hand with marketing, but people who compile and analyze industry information, they use that to kind of keep tabs on competitors and, keep their business operations lean. And then this, I think, is rare, but it does happen as far as those who are on the job search. They may want some industry research because they want to see, or even those selecting a degree program, they want to see how healthy the industry is, to see if it's worth it to try to enter that industry, what opportunities there may be in that industry, and so forth and so on. So those would be the people who may have use for the industry research. And one of the things, though, that can kind of complicate industry research, and you may notice this even as you're doing your worksheet, but if not, you'll notice this with other things. A lot of companies are actually involved in multiple industries, okay? There are a lot of companies that don't just fit neatly into one NAICS code or one SIC code. And you all should know what NAICS and SIC codes are, because that is explained in the materials this week. So if you don't know now, I will assume that means because that you just haven't gotten to completing all the materials yet, but you will know by the time you complete all your materials for this week. So one of the things that can complicate industry research, and so you have to get a little practice with it, is that it gets difficult to do industry research because the NAICS code system just is not perfect, and you can have companies that are identifying with the NAICS code, and you can have any particular NAICS code can either omit major player companies, or they can actually also at times include companies that really don't fit, but somehow still got that NAICS classification. And so this becomes very difficult, especially when you're looking at things like market share. And market share, by the way, Google market share if you don't know exactly what that is. But market share is something that you will have. Well, market share is something that people may request quite a bit. They want to know how much control of the market any one particular company has. And where that gets complicated is that, sometimes you'll have companies that count in that industry, but their NAICS code doesn't reflect this. None of their NAICS codes reflect this, and so that company can be doing a lot of work in controlling a considerable amount of the market share in any particular industry, but they don't. this isn't reflected in things like IBIS World or Business Insights Global because the those companies do not align their NAICS codes with the proper NAICS code for that industry. So, for an example, because I think I was a little hard to follow there, but for an example, Walmart and Target sell a lot of things, so they could technically be industry players in a lot of different industries. However, because you're not just going to have a whole bunch of NAICS codes for any company like that, any retail company that sells a lot of different things for a lot of different types of people. So you may end up like, let's say that you were doing a, trying to find out the market share for sneakers. And let's say that Target and Walmart are actually moving a lot of sneakers, but they don't have a listing within that NAICS code, or they're not identified within the NAICS code for sneakers, whatever NAICS code you're using. And therefore, you can get a sort of a, sort of a jaded view or an incomplete view of how much retail sales of sneakers in that market is controlled by Target or is controlled by Walmart. So things get a little tricky there, and there are going to be times when you might have to search NAICS codes, multiple NAICS codes for one company in order to really get at the information that you need. So when you do reference in general, there are times when your searches are too narrow or too specific, and this holds true also when it comes to business reference and looking up industry information. So you do want to keep that in mind. And then also, when you're looking for a particular NAICS code, or looking for a proper NAICS code, I should say, for your company research, one thing that you're probably going to want to do, you will see how NAICS codes, they can start out general and then get more specific, especially if you start out with a 5-number NAICS code and then you get more specific with a 6-number NAICS code that has those first same 5 numbers, but then an additional number. So be aware of that. And now I would even go as far as to say that I rarely, if ever, have seen NAICS codes be exhaustive and just completely and fully cover all the major companies. Now, of course, your minor companies, you can't get them all anyway. Like, for instance, if you have a NAICS code for music sales and record sales, it might cover, and I know I'm aging myself here by mentioning these places, but it's not necessarily going to cover Sam Goody and some of these other places that used to sell these things. When I was younger, there were these things called CDs and cassettes and vinyl. And, I remember when streaming of music on things like Spotify was not a thing. Dr. J's is not a spring chicken, but I will say that, if you have a NAICS code that covers, for instance, music sales, physical music sales, that NAICS code still might not cover Amazon, and it still might not cover local music stores, if there are any in your community. So that's something to keep in mind. You'll never have an exhaustive list of NAICS codes. But another thing too, you'll never have a NAICS code that is fully exhaustive of all the entities doing business within that industry. But I would say that for the most part, also, you're rarely, that's why you have to use multiple NAICS codes, is because there's not going to be much of a likelihood that everything is fully covered. And there's not going to be much likelihood that you're going to find a NAICS code and it's going to give you an exhaustive list of everybody who is involved in that industry. It's just not going to happen. And another weird thing to consider when dealing with NAICS codes is that my understanding is that the federal government for the United States actually has this sort of a predetermined set of NAICS codes, but usually, like when you're dealing with databases, it's usually the database vendor that is placing companies within a NAICS code. So you may have, so things can vary by database. So you could have a company that is assigned a NAICS code for IBIS World, but that company is not affiliated with that NAICS code in Business Insights Global and isn't affiliated with that NAICS code in Business Source Complete. So those are some other things you're going to have to look at. And even though this probably makes things feel complicated and like you can't even execute the research, the truth of the matter is you can do it. You got this. But you just need a little bit of time. And I do think that that optional video about NAICS codes can be very helpful. It's just that it's long. It's an hour long. So I don't know that any of you are going to take a look at that, but it's there. And if you find yourself doing business librarianship upon completion of this degree, then you may decide to go back and watch it. And it would be a good idea, I think, to do so. Now, just some other key things, and good, I will be able to keep this under 30 minutes. So the last thing that I want to say is ratios, industry ratios can be very, very important. And in fact, I believe ratios were actually mentioned by one of the students in this course who just did this week's discussion board. And she had a pretty good discussion board entry, but she mentioned industry ratios, and yeah, industry ratios are something that you're probably going to want to familiarize yourself with what they mean, all these different types of ratios that you can pull up. What do they mean, and how do you find them, and how do you explain them even to patrons and to students? Because especially now with the Gen Z, I see them use ratio a lot on Twitter, and that's totally different from what the business meaning of ratio is. Although I think it's pretty cool the meaning that ratio is taken on Twitter. I love seeing people just type ratio and get all of those likes whenever somebody says something kind of dumb. But yeah, you're gonna want to dive into some ratio understanding as well. And aside from that, that is really what I'm going to leave it at this time around. I'm not going to talk about the sources because I think that or the resources that you would use for industry research, because I do think that your book has that covered. So read your book. The book is really easy to read for those of you who have been reading it. You already know this. This book is an incredibly easy and quick read. So, when you're looking for industry information, the resources that Celia Ross offers you in that textbook, they are fantastic. They are spectacular. All right. So, yeah, let's keep this. We're even keeping this under 20 minutes. That's very rare for me, but let's go ahead and do it. Let me see if I can get my baby girl into some real sleep. I will holla at y'all. Love y'all. See y'all next week. I am available if you have questions. Email me at austinj@missouri.edu, anyplace, anytime, anytown. Or leave questions in the discussion area for questions. All right. You all have a good one. Stay safe. Stay as cool as possible, both figuratively and